Hello everyone and welcome back to YouTube channel Duval Mafia here, and in today's video I'm going to be looking at some of the current offensive and defensive coordinators that are still in the playoffs or got eliminated in the playoffs that are potential head coaching candidates for the Jacksonville Jaguars heading into the 2022 season. So before I jump right into this, to preface this, I'm just going to do a quick rundown of each one, and I'm going to talk about how they coordinated or coached in the specific playoff game that they were in, and how that affects how I look at them for the head coaching job. So the first one on my list is going to be Brian Dabel, who is 46 years old, and he's the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. And during his first playoff game this year, he actually did as probably good as you could expect any coordinator to possibly do. I mean, they broke an NFL all-time record for having they called a perfect game. And in this game, the offense for the Buffalo Bills did not punt and did not kick a field goal once. So essentially what this means is they scored a touchdown on every single offensive drive that the offense was on the field during the entirety of the game. And to make it more impressive, it was against the Patriots, who have Bill Belichick, one of the best defensive minds in all of the NFL history. And it just shows you that the Buffalo Bills, even though they have more talent on their offense than the Patriots probably have on their defense, they game planned probably as well as you possibly can. And Brian Dabel is definitely a part of that. Maybe it's not all Brian Dabel, but he definitely played a role in this, and it really makes me have him go up my board a little bit for the potential head coaching job. I know he's been rumored for the Dolphins job as well as the Bears job, and he's been on a couple lists for teams, and he should definitely be on the Jacksonville Jaguars list because he is very good with quarterback development, as you've clearly seen. I mean, he helped develop Josh Allen. He came to Buffalo in, I believe, 2018. He's been there for the past 4 seasons. And, I mean, he's helped develop Josh Allen. Josh Allen came into the league inaccurate, pretty much as a project. And even though it took him a little bit, now Josh Allen is a MVP candidate every year. And, I mean, he's only improving each season. And on top of that, for them to go against Bill Belichick and have a historic offensive game just makes me even more excited about Brian Dabel and his potential as a head coach, because he's clearly got the offensive mindset down. Now, of course, they do have a special offense in Buffalo with Josh Allen, with his running ability as well as his arm, and Stephon Diggs, and many other pieces, obviously, with Dawson Knox as well. It's another one. But even though they do have a very talented offense, I don't think people fully grasp how difficult it is to score a touchdown on every single offensive drive throughout the entirety of a game. So that's no turnovers, no punts, and no field goals. That's just absolutely insane to me to try to even comprehend that. Like, that is as good as you can game plan from an offensive standpoint as you possibly can. I mean, there's literally nothing better they could have done. They did as well as they possibly could have done. And this should make Brian Dabel an even bigger fish in the market for teams as a potential head coach in 2022, because, I mean, that clearly shows you that when playoff time comes, he's got some tools in his box that he knows how to bring them out, and he knows how to put together an amazing game plan. I mean, he just did this against the Patriots defense. That's one of the best defenses in the league. I mean, it is not easy to have Bill Belichick lost. That is not an easy thing to do as an offense. And to move on to the next guy, it's Byron Leftwich, who is the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he's 42 years old. And Byron Leftwich, for me, he's actually the favorite for the job. But for me, he's definitely up there, but I don't know if he's quite the favorite. Like, I know I've touched on it in the past. I like Byron Leftwich as a coach. I love him as a coordinator. He's a very, very good coordinator. But I will also say he's also benefited a lot from having Tom Brady on top of having a lot of talent down in Tampa. He also has a great head coach in front of him teaching him a lot in Bruce Arians. But I will admit that he has been very impressive, and their game plan in the playoffs for the offensive side of the ball was pretty good. I mean, I will say that they were missing a lot on offense, obviously with the AB thing, and also with Chris Godwin being out. I mean, they are missing some key players on the offense side of the ball, and their offense isn't really missing clicks. So it shows you that Byron Leftwich can indeed kind of get these guys involved. Now, I know Bruce Arians does play a part in that, as well as Tom Brady obviously does. But make no mistake, Byron Leftwich is a decent coordinator. And of course, his ties to Jacksonville previously have made even former players come out and say that they want Byron Leftwich as the head coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars, simply off the fact that he played for the Jaguars. Like he knows how to be a part of our culture, and he would do nothing but improve this culture if he did come here. So Byron Leftwich also had his stock go up. And to move on to the next guy, it is Todd Bowles, the defensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, funny enough. And honestly, Todd Bowles, I have touched on him a little bit. I do like Todd Bowles, but I don't know if I like him as a head coach. As a defensive coordinator, he is very solid. I will admit that. And I know he was the head coach for a few years in New York, where he didn't do a terrible job. But let's be honest, I mean, they didn't really go anywhere with him. And being truthful, I think they had one winning season with him through 4 seasons. So, I mean, he didn't do a terrible job. But again, I don't like him as a head coach. I think he's too focused on defense. Now, I do remember the Jets did have a very, very good defense when Todd Bowles was there, or at least they had it at some point during his tenure. I'm not sure if it was for his entire tenure, but they did have a borderline elite defense at one point during his tenure, and I'm sure Todd Bowles had a part in that because he is a very defensive-minded coach, and he has made this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, it seems, when they make the playoffs, because the past couple years, when they go into the playoffs, they seem to have a little bit more in their bag, because once they get to the playoffs, they just become a different type of unit. It's weird. During the regular season, like, they're good, but then once the playoffs come around, it's like Todd Bowles gets this unit into a different gear, and they become a great, almost like elite type defense. Whether it's with blitzes, whether it's in coverage. I mean, like, this defense does have some good pieces like Devontae David, Devin White, Shaquille Barrett, and a few more, and Vita Vea as well is a big part. But they aren't like an elite unit, but once the playoffs come around, they all just seem to gel and come together. And this is something that I do like with Todd Bowles. It shows you that he knows exactly what he's doing when he's coaching these guys. But again, I don't know with Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if I want a defensive-minded coach. I love Todd Bowles as a defensive coordinator, but I just don't think he has the offensive prowess to really be a full-on head coach unless he has a very, very good offensive coordinator with him, in which that's something the Jaguars do not have. So Todd Bowles is still going to be a pass for me. I mean, of course he is going to be on the list as a safety net in a way, but I mean, his performance in the playoffs as a defensive coordinator so far with the one game doesn't really change it too much for me. And to move on to the next guy, it's going to be Kellen Moore. So obviously everybody knows that the Cowboys did unfortunately lose. Well, not unfortunately, I actually wanted them to lose. But for Kellen Moore's sake, unfortunately they lost, which means we don't get to see much more from him. But I will say, against what some would call elite 49ers defense, I think Kellen Moore did a very good job. Like, even though they didn't win in the end, I think he drew together a very solid game plan. And there was a few plays that, with good execution, they would have been genius plays. Like, there was one I remember right off the top of my head with Cedric Wilson. It was a lateral to Tony Pollard that would have been a first down and probably a 20 to 30 yard gain, and Cedric Wilson just throws it over his head. I mean, that's a play that Kellen Moore drew up beautifully, but it just wasn't executed by the offense. And it's not fair to put this game on Kellen Moore, in my honest opinion, because even though that final play was probably called by Kellen Moore, Dak Prescott, for some odd reason, decided to hand the ball to his center and not the ref, where the ref could have just put it down and they would have had easily 2 or 3 seconds to get the snap off and either spike it or just snap it for a final play. I don't really understand what he was doing there by handing it to the center, and I don't really understand that completely. I actually didn't mind that play call because let's be honest, they were in that awkward zone of, it was kind of short for a Hail Mary, but it was kind of long for a design to play. So Kellen Moore, in his head, was like, okay, if I can gain 10 to 15 yards, quickly get up and spike the ball, then we get one final play and one final shot at the end zone from around the 20 to 25 yard line. That's that's something that a veteran coach would come up with. And Kellen Moore is still in his 30s. He's a very young guy, but that is something that a veteran coach would come up with as an offensive coordinator, because you could tell the 49ers defense was not ready for it at all, as Dak Prescott pretty much went untouched for 15 yards. And it was honestly a very good play call in my eyes. I actually liked the play call. It just came down to Dak Prescott, for some odd reason. I don't know if it was a heat of the moment thing. I don't know what. He handed the ball to his center, and they started trying to snap it before the ref even sets the ball. I mean, that's common sense. Like, you're taught that in freaking Pee-wee football, in college football, high school football. The ref has to set the ball. The center can't just put the ball down and snap it. That's not how it works. Like, that's Pee-wee football stuff. Like, that's on the center and that's on Dak Prescott. That is not on Kellen Moore. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not putting that on Kellen Moore. And Kellen Moore had them in a position to stay in that game when they honestly got outplayed in every facet of the game by the 49ers, whether it was coaching, from head coaching standpoint. I mean, Shanahan coached an amazing game, and I would not say the Cowboys coached an amazing game, but we're not going to touch on that. But back to Kellen Moore, I overall actually think this game helped his stock a little bit. Again, even though they didn't win, I actually liked what he did in this game. And I actually think that he helped his stock because he had some creativity in that game that I honestly didn't see coming from a mile away. Like, I remember looking at some of the plays, and I was just like, wow, that's actually genius. Like, genuinely, I would never even think about that, whether it was a successful play or not, because some of his plays were not successful in this game due to execution. But some of them, I mean, you watch the plays, and you're like, how does he even, like, who thinks of that? Like, that's the type of mindset that a great coach or a great future coach has. They think outside the box. Like, you look at Sean McVay. He's a good example of this. He thinks a lot of the time outside of the box, and that's what makes him a great offensive mind. Because anybody can run up there, run the ball twice, and then go for a short pass on third down. That's the most basic offense there is. And most offensive coordinators can do that. But when they start becoming something like what Sean McVay and what Kellen Moore was flashing a little bit on in this playoff game, was that they can get creative and they can come up with stuff that you really aren't going to expect and you aren't going to be ready for, which is something that can throw the defense off its toes and can ultimately flip the script of a game with one big play. This is something that I like a lot, and even though they did lose, I think Kellen Moore gains a little bit of stock as a potential head coach for us as well as others, and I still think he's towards the top of my list. I love Kellen Moore. I've been very honest about that. I even wanted him last year. I don't know if some of my older followers might remember that, but I did want him last year as well. He's been on my radar for a while. You can just tell the guy oozes football knowledge. And I mean, when you have these quarterbacks, and Byron Leftwich can also be in this conversation, but when you have these former quarterbacks, they have this different level of football knowledge. They see the offensive game in a different light than a running back would, than a wide receiver would, than even somebody who didn't play quarterback or didn't play offense would. They just see it in a different way. They analyze it in a different way. And it allows them to have these great offensive ideas. And it does go for both Kellen Moore and Byron Leftwich. Even though Kellen Moore didn't play too much in the NFL, he still was a college quarterback, and he still was drafted as a quarterback. And I mean, he still has that knowledge. And the next guy for me is actually Dan Quinn. Now, this is going to be a weird one because he actually was pretty good in his time as a head coach. Like, he did lead the Falcons to 2 winning seasons and a 500 season over 6 seasons. He was unfortunately fired in his 6th season, so we didn't really get to see a full season there. But he was 0-5, so he kind of rightfully deserved to be fired in that season. But to get to him for being the Dallas defensive coordinator, I mean, being honest, he had this Dallas defense looking extremely, extremely good. And Dan Quinn's not very high on my list, or he wasn't at least. But I didn't really think about Dan Quinn as a potential candidate until I saw it a couple weeks ago. And honestly, I don't hate this. He's definitely not at the top of my list, solely off the fact that he is a defensive-minded guy, and he wouldn't really help develop Trevor Lawrence. But I actually like Dan Quinn and what he brings. I think he was overhated in Atlanta. I think he actually was a good head coach in Atlanta. Now, I know they obviously had that thing that happened in 2016 where they blew the 28-3. Everybody knows about it, of course. But still, I mean, he still got them to the Super Bowl that year, and he still had them winning playoff games. And when it came down to defensive game plan, I actually liked what the Dallas Cowboys had as a defensive game plan. It just came down to the fact that the San Francisco 49ers simply have so many weapons on their offense. Between rookie Elijah Mitchell, who just showed up out of nowhere, he's a very explosive back. I mean, he plays very well for a rookie. And then you have Brandon Ayuk, you have Deebo Samuel, you have George Kittle. I mean, you have a lot to worry about on that offense. And I can't really fault the Dallas Cowboys for getting beat by this. Obviously, they could have game planned a little bit better. But being honest, like, the Dallas Cowboys defense was, like, no joke. It was elite this year. Like, there's no joke about that. Like, they were one of the best defenses in the league. Now, I know they gave up a lot of yards, but when it came down to points and when it came down to turnovers, they were one of the best teams in the league. Like, there's just no way around it. And they got such good production out of their young guys like Trayvon Diggs, Micah Parsons, all these guys. It shows you that Dan Quinn knows exactly what he's doing, and he knows how to get these young guys to have impact immediately or have impact very quickly in their NFL careers. And what this shows to me is when a coach can get this type of production out of young guys, it shows you that they have a very well understanding for the NFL and for what they're coaching. And as a defensive coordinator, I like Dan Quinn a lot. I think he's a very, very good defense coordinator and a very, very good defensive mind. But as I said, I don't really want a defensive mind as the head coach of the Jaguars. It's not like that I don't want to focus on defense, but I want somebody who's going to also help develop Trevor Lawrence. That's a big, big thing for me. And that has to be priority number one in my honest opinion. Because as well as I would love to have an elite defense, we saw in 2017, you can have a all-decade level defense or close to it and still lose because you don't have enough talent on the offensive side and you don't have a developed quarterback who can lead you. It's the truth. A defense, even though they say defense wins championships, which I agree with, if you don't have a developed and great quarterback or developed and great offense, it doesn't matter how good of a defense you have. Same thing for offense. You can have the Kansas City or Tampa Bay offense, and if you have a defense that's not good or bad even, you're not going anywhere. Like, you need a good balance on both sides of the ball. And I like Dan Quinn for that. I like him as a defensive coordinator, and I wouldn't be mad with him as head coach, but he's definitely not my top guy and not one of my top guys, solely off the fact that he's not really going to help develop Trevor Lawrence when Lawrence clearly needs it. Even though Trevor Lawrence is considered a generational talent by many, it still doesn't mean that he doesn't need to be developed. I mean, he's still a very raw talent, and he has all the tools to be a special and generational talent, but you still need somebody that can tap into it and really get that out of him. And to move on to the final guy on this video for me, it's going to be actually somebody who the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Jaguars fans are going to be quite familiar with. It's going to be Nathaniel Hackett, who's actually the offensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. Now, many know he started out his career in Buffalo as the offensive coordinator for them, and then he came to Jacksonville as the offensive coordinator from 2016 to 2018. And in 2017, everybody knows that he actually led Blake Bortles and Leonard Fournette to a top 10 offense, which still is mind-boggling to me to this day if you look back at it. Because Leonard Fournette is a committee back on the Buccaneers now, and he got cut, as well as Blake Bortles hasn't started I think he started maybe one NFL game since leaving the Jaguars, and I mean, that was like a spot start, emergency start type thing. If he even has that. I don't even know if he has that. But looking back at it, the fact that he had us at a top 10 offense that year, it makes me wonder how this guy got fired, honestly, because it makes me feel bad for him. Because he had such little to work with in that year, and he still led us to a top 10 offense and helped get us to one play, realistically, from the Super Bowl. I mean, I know he didn't have a great year for us in 2018. Like, we did have a very bad offense that year. But again, what talent did he really have in that year? And you send him to Green Bay, and it's no coincidence that with Aaron Rodgers, they've had like a top 5 offense all 3 years. Now, granted, this is in due part to Aaron Rodgers, but make no mistake, Nathaniel Hackett has done an amazing, amazing job in Green Bay. And he's actually a dark horse for me as a coach for one big reason. He's gotten great value out of Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon both in a committee type back, When these are two very talented backs, and both could be realistic workhorse backs, but he's getting great value and great production out of both. And what this makes me think of is James Robinson and Travis Etienne. Nathaniel Hackett has an understanding of how to get value out of multiple running backs in the same backfield, especially when they're different play styles, because James Robinson is more of a A.J. Dillon, like power back, bowling ball type guy. That's James Robinson's style. And then Travis Etienne is more of a Aaron Jones, kind of jukey, quick, like speedster guy. And this tells me that Nathaniel Hackett has a very high understanding of how to use these guys. And I mean, granted, again, it does help that he has Aaron Rodgers. I'm not going to deny that. He has an MVP quarterback, and I mean, it's the truth. That does help him a lot. But make no mistake, Nathaniel Hackett still has to play a role in this offense. He still has to give Aaron Rodgers the options and what to call at the line realistically. I mean, it's not Rodgers doing it all himself. He's not the one calling the plays. He's not the one designing the plays. Nathaniel Hackett still has a role. And Nathaniel Hackett, for me, even though they didn't play this week, obviously, because they had a bye, so we didn't really get to see him showcase what he has. But, I mean, we have seen it from him. Jaguars fans are very familiar with this, so we don't really need a game to talk about this. But I would not actually be mad with this. I know Jaguars fans are going to get crazy for that, but I actually would be okay with Nathaniel Hackett. He's still young. He's only 42 years old. Believe it or not. It feels like he's been in the league forever as a coordinator, but he's still 42 years old. He came into the league very young as a coach, which that's another positive for me because I don't want a 50 to 60-year-old coach. I really don't. Like, in that 40s range is good. Even in the 30s, like Kellen Moore, I like that too. Even low 50s, maybe. But I don't want a coach who's in their 50s, like high 50s, or even low 60s. That is not a coach that I want because that's not a coach that's going to run a modern type. They're just not going to run the offense like in a way that we want. We want something that's something like what Sean McVay does. That I idol Sean McVay for the mind that he has from an offensive standpoint. And Kyle Shanahan for the 49ers actually is also in this conversation. But mainly Sean McVay for how he utilizes his players. And he knows each strength. And he knows how to get the most out of each one. It's just such a special thing. And if the Jaguars can get a coach even half as good from a mind standpoint as Sean McVay, I would be so ecstatic. And I think Nathaniel Hackett, Kellen Moore, and even Byron Leftwich all have that type of potential. It just takes a fact of, one, the Jaguars picking the right one, and two, the Jaguars giving them a good roster to work with. It's got to be a balance. They have to have a good roster to work with, and you also have to have a good coach to get the most out of the roster. They have to coexist. And that's the most important thing for me. But for Nathaniel Hackett, even though we didn't see him, so I can't really say if his stock went up or down, because obviously he didn't coach a game. But for me, he's still up there a little bit. He's not quite to the top of my list, but I do like him a lot. And if I had to rank these guys on a list for me, at the way bottom would probably be Todd Bowles. Next would be Dan Quinn. Then I'd probably go... this is tough. I'd probably go after that Nathaniel Hackett and Brian Dabel, in that they kind of coexist in that number 3 spot for me, honestly. They're like 3A, 3B. Number 2 would be Byron Leftwich, number 1, Kellen Moore. I don't know what it is about Kellen Moore. I just think the dude has a special football mind that you really don't come across every day. I mean, he's got a top 5 mind level from an offensive standpoint in the NFL. Like, some of the stuff that he comes up with is just out of this world. And it's something that the Jaguars really need with Trevor Lawrence, in my honest opinion, because, and I want to see Trevor Lawrence be great. Like, I want to see him reach his potential. And I think a coach like Kellen Moore or Byron or either Hackett or Dabel, all these guys could help him get there. But Kellen Moore, for whatever reason, he beats out these other guys slightly for me, just off the fact that there's just something about the way he calls the game. It's just something about it. He understands it at such a young age. Like, he still has so much to learn, but you can already tell that he's going to be a great coach someday in the NFL. And I want the Jaguars to jump on this now, because the quicker that you get him locked up as a head coach, the more likely you are to secure him. Because if he goes to another place and gets a head coaching job, he's going to be there for a long time, most likely. Or if he stays one more year in Dallas as a coordinator, next year he's going to get scooped up so quickly. Just watch and see what happens with this guy. In a couple years, he's going to be a very good coach. And if he doesn't line up being a good coach, I will be extremely shocked. Like, it is possible. There is a slight chance that he doesn't fit as a coach, but I just can't see it. The guy has too much football knowledge. And Byron Leftwich is another one. Even though Byron Leftwich is the favorite, I think he's solely the favorite off the fact that he played for the Jaguars and he's connected to the fan base. He's connected to the city. He's connected to the team. I think that's why he's the odds favorite. I don't know if he is the favorite at this point. Like, I have seen former Jags players approving of this and them wanting Byron Leftwich, and I would be very happy with Byron Leftwich. I will come out and say that. But I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if it's all smoke. I don't really know. And for Nathaniel Hackett and Brian Dabel, either of them are good plan Bs for me, really. Plan A would be either Kellen Moore or Byron Leftwich, and then plan B would be one of these guys. Preferably Brian Dabel over Hackett slightly, simply the fact that we've had Hackett. And even though I love what Hackett does, we've kind of seen what he does, and he has been working with an MVP level quarterback in Green Bay for the past couple of years. So it's kind of hard to truly judge him. And Brian Dabel helped develop Josh Allen into an MVP quarterback. He didn't show up with a 35-year-old MVP quarterback like Nathaniel Hackett did. So that's what really gives Brian Dabel this slight edge for me. And with that being said, I am going to wrap up this video. So if you did make it this far, thank you for listening. And I do appreciate your support very, very much. And if you did enjoy this video and what I had to say, make sure to leave a like. And if you are new to the channel, I do make plenty of videos like this, so make sure to subscribe. And as always, peace out, Duval.